If you're like me, few things strike terror into your heart like the prospect of having to negotiate a job offer. Now, for some people, like business people, it's more of a game where they push for advantage, they try and get the best deal for themselves as they can. If you're looking for some sort of video that'll give you instructions on how to play it like a game and get the best possible offer for yourself at any expense, this probably isn't the video for you. Instead, this is a video that's going to focus on telling you how to get a fair offer for yourself, how to get the right value out of the job so that you're happy at the end and the company's happy to have you. Hi, my name is John Miller, the Delivered Engineer. I spent the last 30 years working in the software industry at a variety of jobs, ranging from big tech such as Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, to municipalities and also at educational institutions. Today, I want to share some of my experience in negotiating a fair offer based on the many different times that I switched jobs over my career. Now, again, if you're looking for a game the system sort of video, this isn't for you. However, if you want to understand how you can arrive at the best offer you can hope to get and what sort of things you should do to ensure that you have a good discussion with your employer, well, keep on watching and I'll do what I can to share tips that I learned over the last 30 years. Now, before any sort of negotiations for an offer, you need to meet certain prerequisites in terms of being ready. Make sure that you're in a good position to solicit a fair offer. First and foremost, the best position to be in is when you have multiple different companies vying for you to come and join them. In other words, you have multiple offers that you're considering at the same time. If this isn't the situation for you, then you should still treat your current job as one that you don't have to leave, and ultimately it's your default behavior. You'll have to be enticed away from that job to join a new company. Make sure that you understand the general market. Research what is typically being paid to people with about your level of experience for this type of position in the place that you're looking at being employed in. Write down your findings and the origin of those findings so that you can collate the information you get from a variety of sources and come up with the best information that you can to base your negotiations upon. Start with friends and colleagues, asking them if they have any idea what somebody of your level of experience would be paid working for that particular company in that particular location. For example, let's say that you're applying to a software company in Seattle with 10 years of experience for a senior developer position. Experience, job level, location, and internal or external hire can all have significant impact on what a fair offer is. For example, for location, within the US, you can be looking at a factor of 2 difference depending on where the job is located. If you widen that to include different countries, it can be as much as a factor of 5. For example, somebody who might be earning $150,000 a year in the US might start out earning more like $30,000 a year in the UK. Also, bear in mind that external hires are usually paid more than internal hires for the same job level and position. This is just an artifact of the way our industry works. So, if you're talking to friends who already work at the company to see what they're making, if they've been there for a while, they may be making less than what a fair offer for you would be. So, keep this in mind. Read sites like Glassdoor.com and Salary.com to see what people are reporting for salary at the appropriate location and job level that you're looking at the company. Bear in mind these numbers can vary quite a bit and they can be highly inaccurate. Most of them are self-reported numbers and they can be manipulated a couple ways. First, the company might seed some bad information for it. I haven't seen that happen for sure, but it's a possibility. Second, people who are submitting information for themselves can wind up screwing up when they submit it. They might put an old job title rather than their current job title. They might confuse salary with total compensation and put a much higher number for salary than they're actually getting. Or in some cases, they might put what they think they deserve rather than what they are actually getting. So you have to take all of these numbers with a grain of salt. Make sure that you have a good handle on what your compensation has been at your current job. In other words, take a look at your earnings history for the last 3 or 4 years if you've been there that long. Take a look at what your salary was, what your annual merit increase was, in other words, the increase to your salary, how much of a bonus you got each year, and any equity that you were awarded. Also, take a look at what the medians were or the advertised ranges for the level that you were at the company for each of those years, if you have access to that information. In addition, you'll also want to get your stock vesting schedule. that describes how much outstanding equity you have in the company, when it's going to vest, and if it's an option, what the strike price is for that option. Using this data, calculate the next year's compensation for you at the current job, and also what you expect the compensation would be for the next 4 years based on your previous performance, and separately based on the medians that you know of for the awards at your company. This is the basis for any calculations you do in terms of seeing whether a job is attractive to you compared to your current compensation. Normally, I would recommend that people don't look at moving to a new job unless they're getting at least a 10% total compensation bump over their current job, all other things being equal. When you're preparing to be interviewed, try and arrange for all of your interviews to be at about the same time so that you'll complete the interviews, and if there's an offer coming, get the offer within a few weeks of each other. Even if you only have a single job you're looking at going to, it's very important to interview at multiple places and have multiple offers to compare to each other. This is important not just in terms of making sure that you go to a good place, but also in terms of having some leverage for when you negotiate. It's usually a good idea to let the companies that you're interviewing with know that you're interviewing with other companies as well, especially if they're peers to that company. This will typically get you a better initial offer from the company, and it will also get you a quicker response time as they know that they're competing against other companies, and if they're slow to get back to you, but the other companies get back to you quicker, they may lose their chance to hire you. So let's say you've assembled all the prerequisite information, you've got it all put together, you know roughly what you're doing, and you've done your interviews. How do you go about actually negotiating your offer? First, make sure that you enter the negotiations with a good mindset and the right intentions at heart. If it looks like they're not giving you a fair offer, don't be afraid to walk away. Nothing says you have to go to this company, and if you have a job right now, nothing says you have to leave that job. Also, remind yourself that a new job can look a lot more interesting and a lot more unique than it really is when you're just learning about it. After all, the recruiter that you're dealing with is somebody who specializes in selling their company to other people. It's very natural for you to be sort of swallowed up by that enthusiasm and think that this is a unique opportunity you just can't pass up. In my experience over the last 30 years, on the one hand, you could say that some of the opportunities were unique, but what I would say is that comparable opportunities always come up later, and not necessarily that much later. So don't feel like you're missing a unique opportunity if the negotiation process is starting out poorly with that job. If before interviews, or during interviews, or on the interview day, you're asked what your minimum salary expectations is for the position, try not to answer that question. Instead, say that you're focused on interviewing, learning more about the company, more about the position, more about the type of people you would be working with, and that all those are significant factors for you in figuring out whether to go to the company or not. Even if they push for you to name a number, try not to. When they give you enough information, when you know exactly what sort of job they would be making an offer for, then say, well, now I'll go and do some research and see what I think a good offer is based on my experience and on what I can learn about the company. That's a completely reasonable thing to say. I've never seen a company turn somebody away, refuse to interview them, or refuse to make an offer to them just because that candidate wouldn't give them an initial number that they're supposed to meet. Be consistent about how you represent your compensation and the other pieces of the compensation package that you have in your current company. Bear in mind that the recruiters and the companies that you're dealing with have ways, both formal and informal, of finding out, at least to a rough degree, about your compensation. You never know when they're going to know somebody who can say, oh, I had the same type of job and this is what they paid me. You really don't want to be in a position where you're having to justify lies. For me personally, I've found that telling the truth, being honest, or just saying I don't want to talk about that, is the best way to move forward. It's a lot easier, on top of everything else, than trying to keep a bunch of exaggerations straight in your head. Be very clear about timeframes with the recruiter and with the companies that you interview at. For example, I might say, by the way, I'm interviewing with 2 or 3 other companies. The latest of these, I won't have my interview until next week, and then from what I understand, it'll be 2 weeks after that before I have either an offer or an answer saying they're not interested in hiring me. So, as a result, I won't be able to accept an offer for at least 3 weeks. Now, companies put a lot of time and energy and money into looking for good candidates. If they've interviewed you and found that you're somebody they want to hire, it's not really a big deal for them to wait for a few more weeks. And if worse comes to worse and you lose that opportunity, well, a company that's wanted to extend you an offer at one point generally will be very open to extending you an offer later if you contact them and say you're interested in interviewing again. The initial offer from a company may be made informally rather than formally. In other words, it may just be a discussion over the phone, or it may be an email that gives you some figures and asks how that sounds to you. There's a couple reasons why they give an informal offer rather than a formal offer. First, it takes work to put together a formal offer description, so they don't want to do that unless there's a good chance you're going to be interested in accepting that offer. Second, if a formal offer is made to somebody, that means the company can't keep interviewing other people for that position. They have to wait until you respond to that formal offer before they can continue interviewing. Now, the chances of them finding somebody else who's qualified for the position while you're deciding on the offer is relatively slim, but if they can't even look, there's still a possibility they'd miss somebody good, and they don't want to do that. I'm usually happy to consider offers informally shared over email or over the phone, but make sure that you bear in mind this is very different from having a formal offer. You should not cancel any of your other interviews or say no to any other offers based on an informal offer. There's too much of a chance that there was some sort of a misunderstanding or the situation changes at the company and they wind up rescinding that informal offer. Instead, you want to wait for a formal offer before you take any action with the other companies that you're talking to. Once you know the level, the position, the job title that they're going to offer you, that's the time to take a look at the research you've already done and, if necessary, to supplement it with additional information to help evaluate how fair that offer is, how close it is to what you were expecting. Based on the research that you do, you may come back with a set of things that you would want changed about that offer. And this way you'll be able to support those with facts and information rather than it looking like some arbitrary number. You never want to come up with just out of the blue arbitrary numbers. Just like you did with the compensation for your current company and position, calculate based on the offer the compensation for 1 year and for 4 years at the new company. Based on that and the information that you already have, you can see whether it meets that 10% or more above what you're making right now guideline. In addition to comparing it to the information you have from your research about whether the offer is fair for the type of work you'll be doing. One caution about the offer: be very careful about pushing to have a higher job title or a higher salary ladder level position than what they're offering you. It's true that the position that you come in at is important in terms of promotions, but what you really care about is the compensation. When you come in at a higher level, you'll be competing against people who are more experienced and have been at the company for longer, making it harder for you to do a great job in the eyes of the company. They know a lot more about the requirements for their positions. They know a lot more about the people they have at the levels that you would be considered for. So it's probably best for you to leave that leveling decision up to them rather than pushing to come in at a higher level and potentially putting yourself in a situation where not only do you not succeed at the job, but you wind up being put on a performance improvement plan and then having to leave within a year. That's sort of a worst case, but it does wind up leaving a black mark on your resume that you may have to explain away to other people that you interview with. If you're lucky enough to be in the position where you're considering multiple offers from multiple companies, be aware that a very common question for companies that want you to join them to ask is, so what would it take for you to stop thinking about those other offers and stop waiting for them and just accept our offer? This is a way of the company indicating they're willing to pay a little bit extra in order to make sure that they get you rather than one of their competitors. Now, you want to make sure that you have an answer for this question ahead of time. It's perfectly fine for that answer to be, I'd like to wait and see what all the offers are before I make any decisions. That's a reasonable thing to say. A couple weeks won't hurt anybody. If you do decide that you would like to have the option of them to buy you out of considering more, don't ask for anything ridiculous. Instead, some of the best things to ask for is a bit more equity in the company. In other words, a higher amount of stock awards, or to have a higher cash signing bonus initially, or maybe a slightly higher salary. That's not usually as flexible. So you might say, for example, that, oh, well, if you add another $100,000 to the stock, then yeah, of course I'll come right away. And what you're going to ask for is up to you, but make sure you have a way of justifying it. And now, some general advice for you as you think about money and compensation and negotiating these offers. First and foremost, remember there's a lot more to life than just the amount of money that you're getting paid. As software engineers, we're lucky enough to work in an industry where, generally speaking, we enjoy pretty much any job that we're doing. And so you're in this fortunate position where instead of having to force yourself to work, you have the luxury of choosing a place that you want to work at. So you should remember that as you're looking at switching jobs. Don't respond to offers right away. It's very exciting to get an offer, especially if it exceeds your expectations, but you still want to sleep on any offer that you get. I can't emphasize this enough. You would not believe how different things can look the day after you got the information. Don't just wait a couple hours. Don't get the offer in the morning and wait until the evening. Sleep on it. Talk to the people you care about and see what they think of the offer, your family, the people that it affects directly. Make a decision if you can that night, but don't communicate it. Sleep on that decision and see if you still feel the same in the morning. This is a very reasonable way to approach making life-changing decisions, and waiting a day, I think, is something that anybody who's extending an offer will completely respect and understand. When you've decided to accept an offer, make sure that it's a formal offer. Once you get it, don't submit the acceptance back yet. Instead, contact the other companies who are considering hiring you and let them know that you've got an offer that you're going to accept. Now, in some cases, one of those other companies will like you enough to sweeten the pot and really give you an offer that kind of tips your thinking into saying, oh, well, maybe I'll go to that company instead. Do the same sort of thing where you sleep on it if at all possible. And the other thing I would recommend is if you do happen to get attracted to a different company, don't go back and forth. Don't then go back to the original company that was going to hire you and say, oh, well, actually, this other company offered me this much. I'd like to get even more from you if you want me to come. That sort of back and forth generates ill will from the people doing the hiring, and that can reach to your hiring manager, which is a situation you really don't want. So if you do wind up saying that you're going to accept an offer and then going and taking a different one instead, try not to have that ever be after you formally accepted an offer. You want to be a person of your word in this regard. And that means you want to be cautious about formally accepting anything. You don't want to renege on accepting an offer. It's a bad place to be. Once you're finished with all your negotiations and you've got your new job, make sure you keep the contact details of the recruiters who you dealt with through the process at the various companies. It may be useful for you in the future, and it'll certainly be useful for people you know as they want contacts in those companies to talk to about possibly joining them. So make sure you don't have to stay in touch with them and send them Christmas cards, but just keep that information. It may come in handy in a couple of years. For example, I joined Amazon something like 2011. I still have the contact details of the recruiter I dealt with then, and over the years I pinged them several times just to see what was going on and to have that be one of the options I can consider as I was looking at moving. So I highly recommend that you do the same yourself. And that's pretty much everything. If you found this video to be useful, please think about leaving a like and subscribing so you can see other videos like it that I produce in the future. And, as always, thank you for watching and keep on pushing forward.